Hello and welcome to Monday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, where today I think we've got a very exciting puzzle. This is another puzzle from Aad Van De Wetering, the Dutch constructor, one of my favourite Sudoku makers, frankly. He is his quality and originality is absolutely stunning. We've done, I think, 3 puzzles on the channel so far. They've always been incredibly well received. They're a lot of fun, and they always make you think. Now this is an expansion of a Sudoku I did about 2 weeks ago from Aad. You can see these T-shapes in the grid, and you may be wondering what they mean. Well, just to remind you, what a T-shape means, whatever we put into this T-shape by way of numbers would have to be the same numbers that would appear in each of the other T-shapes. So all of the numbers in any T-shape, they must be different, so we can't repeat digits. But then once we've got the set of numbers in this T-shape, we would know the same set of numbers as in all of the other T-shapes. Now there's one more rule, which is that when you put, let's look at this 6 for example, the orthogonally connected white squares with this grey 6, so that would be that one, and that one, must contain digits bigger than a 6. So whenever we have a number in a T-shape, we must make sure that any white shapes that are connected, or white cells that are connected, contain a bigger digit. That's all we know. So you can see what Aad has managed to do is he's reduced the number of givens to just 8. Quite often a feature of Cracking the Cryptic puzzles is that we never get to a Sudoku with 17 givens. We're always somewhere lower than that. But that's one of the good things about the channel. Now, if you want to have a go, do click on the link under the video, and that will take you to our webpage where you can play along. And as I say, I really recommend it. Aad's puzzles are terrific. Now, quick admin note to say that Mark and I have noticed, of course, that it's just ticked over into February, which means that for all of you who are patrons of the channel on Patreon, obviously thank you, and our Patreon reward puzzle will be up on Patreon soon, so do keep a lookout for that. And with that, I'm going to have a go at this. I've been looking forward to this, so let's have a look at how to do. Well, you can see we've only got 2 givens that are the same. I don't think, actually, it's interesting, I don't think a T-shape can contain an 8, certainly not in this puzzle anyway. So let's just think about that, because I was looking at whether I could pencil mark any 8s down in this block. So these squares are ruled out by these 8s. But can we put an 8 in the T-shape? Well, we clearly can't put an 8 in this square because there are 3 orthogonally connected white squares, and we need to make them all greater than 8. Well, that's not going to be possible. Now, in theory, this square could be an 8 because we could put a 9 here. But if this T-shape contains an 8, we know that that 8 must be duplicated in all of the other T-shapes, and therefore the 8s would have to appear in this single cell of the T that has only one orthogonally connected white square, because we know there's only one number greater than 8. And you can see this one, for example, that definitely cannot be an 8. So in fact, all of that allows me to pencil mark 8s there and over here. Okay, right, okay, well hang on, I should have spotted this straight away. This 2 is a bit of a gimme, isn't it? Because this 2 is in a white cell next to a grey cell. So we know that this digit must be lower than a 2, so we can write that in. That's a 1. And that gives us a 1 that needs to appear in every T-shape. So actually, look at that. Where are we going to put the 1 in this T-shape? Well, these 3 squares can't be 1 anymore, so it's going to have to be there. Because there's a 1 in one of these 2 squares, but again, we can disambiguate this because we can never put a 1 outside and next to a T-shape, because the implications of this being a 1 would be that this square would have to be lower than a 1, and it can't be. So the 1 must be there. It's just so good, these puzzles. Look at this. Now these ones exploit the same little logical trick that we've just discovered, only just a little harder to see. So we know there's a 1 in one of those 3 squares. Well, let's study this. This one can't be a 1 because it's next to a 3 that's in a T shape. So this square definitely needs to be greater than 3. 1 is not greater than 3, so let's remove that one. And that one is next to this T shape. So again, there's no way that can be a 1 either. So the 1 is there. So we know this can't be a 1. We don't know that. Well, actually, we can narrow it down to 2 cells, can't we? This square can't be a 1 either because it would be next to a T. So the 1 is either here or here in this box, but I don't think we know which. Let's have a look up here. Yeah, this is okay. Now we can do some work on the ones in this block, because we've got these ones here and here, ruling out the obvious squares, but I can't put a 1 next to a T shape. So there is ruled out, and that one is ruled out. So the 1 is either it's in one of those 2 squares, so it's not there, so it's here, which means there's a 1 in the T shape down here, which is what we were expecting. And the 1 in this T shape, well, it could be here, but I guess it could also be in one of those 2 squares. So I'm not sure we can disambiguate that. You may be seeing how to do it if you're watching the video. I'm not seeing how to do it, so I'm going to move on. So we know we've got 1, 3 and 6 needing to appear in every possible T shape. So we know there's a 6 in one of those 2. Yes, that's a nice one, isn't it? So we know there's no 6 in those 2 squares, therefore there's a 6 in one of these 2 squares. Well, we can't put the 6 here because it's next to a 5. So the 6 goes in there, which locks a 6 up at the top. And similarly, oh no, we can't do that with the 3. The 3 could still be in either position. Right, so what am I meant to be spotting next? And one of the lovely things about Aad's puzzles is there will be something to spot. There will be something when I see it. I think that's obvious, but my brain wasn't clever enough to spot it immediately. That 5 is interesting because that, with this 1, 3, that rules out there being a 5 from any T shape. Yeah, this is very clever. Look at this. This 5 is, I think this might be important because we've looked at 8s. We know 8s aren't appearing in the T shape. 9s obviously can't appear in the T shape. Otherwise we'd have to put 10s outside. So 8s, 9s and 5s are ruled out. Now 7s are also impossible because look, this 7 here, if there is a 7 in this T shape, it would have to be in this position. And this position has 3 orthogonally connected white squares. So I could put an 8 and a 9 into 2 of them, but the third one would then be unfillable. So there is no 7, there is no 8, there is no 9, there is no 5 in the T shapes. Now that rules out 4 of the 9 digits. There are 5 cells in the T shape. So those 3 squares must be 2, 4 and 6. So we now know the composition of every one of the T shapes. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6. So what am I meant to do with that information? There must be, well, this 2, I guess, that must be here, mustn't it? Because it can't be in either of those squares. We know there's a 2 in the T shape. And that 3, that's very nice. So this T shape becomes completed. This can't be a 2 anymore, so the 2 is in one of those 2 squares. Now this square is a 4. Now that means neither of those 2 squares can be a 2 or a 3. And we've got a 2 and a 3 here, so what can we say about that? No, I don't think. I thought that was going to be a bit of a breakthrough, but I'm not sure it is. 2s, 3s, 4s, 3s. Yeah, okay, so we can look at this 3 now and ask where a 3 can go in this box. It can't go here, obviously. It also can go in neither of those squares because it would then be next to a 4 or a 6. And whatever we put in here, it's going to be greater than 3. So the 3 goes there, which means there's a 3 at the bottom. Which means there's a 3 over there. Now this square suddenly has become restricted because it's next to a 3. This one must be a 2. Because obviously if it's a 4 or a 6, it's greater than a 3. This is so clever. Right, so now this 2 I think is important because let's have a think about this box. Where can the 2 go in this box? Well, it obviously can't go in those squares. But because of this 1 here, or if you like, because of these 1s here, we know this square is not a 1. And therefore I cannot put a 2 in either of those squares because we know this will be bigger than a 1. So actually, I think 2 is ruled out from all of those squares as well, which means that's a 2. Okay, that's interesting as well. So now I was about to pencil mark 2s into all 3 of these positions, but I can't put the 2 here because this square, if this is 2, that would require that square to be a 1 and that square to be a 1. We can't put 2 1s in the same 3x3 block or in the same T shape, so the 2 is in one of those 2 squares. And oh, hang on, we looked at 2 in this box up here before. Now let's think about, yes, that's better now. So now these aren't 2, these aren't 2, these can't be 2 because they're next to a 4. So these are 2, and therefore this is not a 6 anymore. This is a 1-2 pair. Oh, and that's good because now the 3 has become much more potent, because now where can we put a 3 in this box? We can't put one next to the 4. We can't put it here. So this... So we can pencil mark... Oh, no, we can do loads now. So firstly, let's look at 2s again. There must be a 2 in one of those 2 squares. Now it can't go next to a 3. So that's a 2. This is beautiful logic, isn't it? It's just beautiful. Look at these 2's now. And now these 1's become relevant because we know the 2 is in one of those 3 squares. But again, we can't put the 2 here because we can't put a 1 here. It's just so clever. And now we've got an X-wing on 2's. Now what do I mean by that? Well, we've got the 2's locked into the same 2 columns of the grid in 2 different 3x3 boxes. So we know in the finished solution, it's possible this is a 2, but if this is a 2, we know for absolute certainty this will be a 2. Similarly, or vice versa even, if this is not the 2 in the finished solution, we know for a fact this will be a 2, and therefore we know for a fact that will be a 2. So we know either the 2's will be arranged like that or like that. Either way, there can't be any more 2's in columns 7 and 9, and therefore there must be a 2 in one of those 2 squares in box 3. Now, that is important because we can't put a 2 here because this is a 6, and 2 is definitely less than 6, so the 2 is not up there. This is the 2. In fact, those 2 squares, I should have put that in earlier, I think. They have to be 7 and 9 because they've got to be greater than 6 and they can't be 8. So this 2 now resolves the 2 here and the 1 here. That means that's a 1, which means that's a 1. These 2 squares must be 3 and 4 to complete our T shape. This is not 1 anymore. And I wanted to look at the 3's. So I started all that logic by looking at the 2's, but now we can look at the 3's. Look, so we've got 3's. So there's a 3 in one of those 2 positions. Now, is there anything that restricts which way round that's got to be? I don't know. There's a 1, 2 and a 3 here, so this square's got to be a 4 or a 6. Oh, well, there you go. There you go. So if this square's got to be a 4 or a 6, we know that the 3 in this T shape must be in one of those 3 squares. So therefore, that square can't be a 3. That's a 4, that's a 3. And okay, I can't immediately see whether I can resolve which one of those is a 4, but we've got this 3 here means that this is a 3. Three, 4. So now this 4 rules out 4 from all of those squares again. So now that's a 4. It's very easy with this puzzle to miss what is staring you in the face. It's just a different way of thinking you need. So these 3 squares now are 2, 3 and 6. And that's useful because there's 3 here and here. So these 2 can't be 3. So the 3 must be there, which means that one of those 2 is a 3. These squares are 2 and 6 in some order. Oh, but there's a 3 there, so this one must be less than a 3, so this is a 2. That's a 6, that's a 6, that's a 4. So this must be a 2 by our X-wing logic. And Oh, now look, if we look along this row, we've got a 6 here. So both of these squares have got to be greater than 6. So they've got to be 7 and 9. This square is the only square left in the row. That's a 5. Therefore that's a 5. Now in this box we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and in this column we've got 6 and 7. So the 6 and 7 must appear in those two squares. So this can't be an 8 anymore. The 8 must be here. This must be a 9 to complete the block. And there must be a 9 in one of those two squares. These two squares have got to be 3 and 5 to complete this box, look. So 5s. So these two squares form a 5-8 pair now, because we can only put a 5 in one of these two positions down in this bottom corner. So we're still looking to place 4, 6. Now we can place a 4 here. I could have probably got that before, but I didn't see it. So this square must be a 6 or a 7. This square must be a 7 or a 9. Where can we put a 6 in column 9? Look. Well, we have a 6 there ruling out that square, so it's got to appear there. This must be a 9 because it can't be a 7. Therefore that's a 9 and that's a 7. Now you notice we've got all of our T-shapes filled completely now, so we might be on the right track. 9, 7. Now there's a 7 in one of those two squares, a 7 in one of those two squares. The 3, 5 isn't being resolved by this square, unfortunately, so we're going to have to look elsewhere for the next deduction. There's a 5 in one of those two positions. These two squares have got to be, what's that, 5 and 7, I think, to complete the row. Again, we're not getting help from the T-shape to disambiguate there. 6, 7. This 6, 7 pair points at that 7 pencil mark and resolves it. Now, you can see that we need to put a 4 somewhere in this column. It can't go next to the 6, so it must be there. And these two squares are going to have to be 8 and 9 in some order. This is an 8 or a 9. This is an 8 or a 9 to complete this column. Therefore, this should be a 4. That resolves the 4 in the centre. That gives us a 4 here, look. So this, now the 9, we've got a 9 there as well. So that's 9, that's 8, that's 8, that's 9. You can see the 5 here resolves the 3 and the 5. That puts a 3 in. I think we are on the home straight. This must be a 6, 9 pair. We don't yet know the order, but we now do know for sure that this square must be an 8. That places an 8 into one of those two positions. This has got to be 5, 7 and 8. So this is a 5 or an 8. 5, 7, 8 here. That can't be a 5. Okay. That square is going to complete that row, isn't it? So that's got to be a 5. That resolves, this is a 5. That resolves our 5, 7 at the top. And again, I feel I'm not seeing the wood for the trees here. This 7 as well. That resolves everything down there. That forces this to be a 9. That resolves the 9 and the 6. That should give us a 7 into this square. That resolves that's an 8, 5, 7 combination here. And we have done it, I think. barring silly mistakes, we are going to finish this beautiful, beautiful Sudoku puzzle. Right, 9, 8, and hopefully 6 in the centre. Yes. What a beautiful puzzle that is. I loved that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do let me know in the comments, and we'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.